says, get that India. Big boy.
Maika, Sivo! Call an ambulance! Maybe call a police! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell-Gillard!
Hello and welcome back to an instant reaction podcast on the tip sheet. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020. Joining the breakdown, heart palpitating, sweat-inducing, frustration, enraging 1 point winner of the Gold Coast Titans is my good mate, Sixties. Big fella, perhaps not the result we wanted in terms of the mechanics of it, but they're all those wins, they count the same when the season is in the books, and goodness knows we needed this win after what happened last week with the Warriors.
Yeah, look, I'm not quite. I'm still coming to grips with what I just watched out at the stadium. Only just home now from the car park at the Leafs Club. It was even though it wasn't a huge crowd there, it took a while to get out of the precinct tonight. But yeah, I'm trying to take it in. I've just put the replay on in the background as I'm recording this, and it's look, it was one of those games where we talked about what we don't want to see against the Titans.
guess what we saw,
and it was exactly what we saw. Yeah,
all the danger points, all the the conversations about where the Titans could trap you into falling into their rhythm. The Eels fell victim to it tonight. And look, to their credit, they rallied at halftime and played a much more stoic brand of football in the second half. And on the back of that more disciplined gameplay, it was enough to get them home. But, geez, there were some frustrations in the first half. Ill discipline from Sivo and Reg, RCG having that lapse mentally leading to the sin bin. And look, I think both those sin bins, we can talk about in the later 60s, I was happy with both those calls. But there were plenty of other calls I wasn't happy with.
Yeah, and I think that's where we are expressing what, we really found a bit hard to believe out there. Surprisingly, yeah, we're probably not going to be talking about the sin bins because it was hard to argue against them when you look back at them. But man, there was plenty else out. Plenty of other things
missed
out
forward
there,
passes off kickoffs, missed knock-ons, an offside that was policed incredibly inconsistently. I mean, the Titans definitely got the right rub of the green on those two sin bins. I have no issues with what the official butler made or the bunker made in those calls. I think they were the right calls. But yeah, I feel like there were plenty of other calls in between that were pretty ordinary.
Yeah, absolutely. Absurd, some of the officiating. However, we are going to try to give as balanced account as we can, even with our biased eyes. And before we do, of course, a shout out to our sponsors, Big Swing Golf at Northmead and Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta. And also, of course, a shout out to Parramatta Leagues Club, the home of the Eels. We were there earlier this afternoon with our pre-game podcast. This time we weren't doing it post-match. It was all pre-match, where we're going with this instant reaction that we'll be posting online for people to respond to. But, yeah, thank you to Parramatta Leagues Club. It certainly makes it the home of the Eels on match days.
Yes, sir. All right, let's talk some football in a bit more depth now, 60s. Parramatta Eels prevailing, crucially, 25-24 over the Gold Coast Titans at the conclusion of round 20. A Mitchell Moses field goal, the difference between the two teams. For the Titans, it was a Khan Pereira double, followed by tries to Sami, which I don't agree with. I thought that was a pretty obvious double movement. And Tanner Boyd, they're rounding out their four try scorers. Boyd, 2 from 4 off the tee for try conversions, being crucial, obviously. 2 from 2 for the penalty conversions. Two missed field goals, for the Titans. One was charged down, one sprayed to the right, I think, if I recall correctly. For the Eels, Reagan Campbell-Gillard opened the scoring in the 5th minute, followed by Will Penasini, Bryce Cartwright, and the King with a poster effort of a try there in the left corner as he went full outreach to get it down just before his left leg hit the sideline. Moses, 3 from 4 on try conversions, one single penalty goal added, and that crucial field goal in the 74th minute. Sivo, 21st minute sin bin. Campbell-Gillard, 25th minute sin bin. leaving the Eels down 2 for a good 6 minutes there, 60s. And I got to say, as bad as some of the defensive efforts were at times, I thought that for the most of that period, they certainly tried their backsides off, 2 men down in a big hole.
Yeah, it was. I mean, the game really could have got away from us there because, watching it out there live, I said to the others, these are match-defining decisions. The double sin bin, because you can't get down to 11 players and not think that you're going to pay the penalty. You know, like for us to be I mean, Gutho made an awful mistake with that attempted catch just before half time, which then, of course,
2 points
from the scrum, the Titans got 2 points with the scrum penalty. And mind you, that was the icing on the cake for the crowd out there.
There was
a scrum penalty.
A pretty vocal chant that went up after that.
Yeah. But again, the Eels have to look in the mirror as to how that situation came about.
Agreed.
Because we were attacking down the other end and basically threw away an opportunity to keep the play down there for the rest of that half. And then, as I said, it was, and I think it was a stray pass from Dejan Arce that went behind everyone. But then Gutho dropped that relatively simple catch by his standards and gave them the opportunity to be 2 points up. Now, I was fairly happy to have had what transpired in the first half and to be only 2 points down at half time. I thought, this is a win. And then when they came out and scored first in the second half, I thought, okay, we go on with it from here. We didn't go on with it from there. We got the 2 points, but my goodness, didn't the team put us through some palpitations in that second half? I think the referee helped with some of those palpitations as well. But we have to be fair and say, you know what, we can't disagree with the sin bins.
No,
but we can talk about the calls that probably should have gone Parramatta's way and didn't go Parramatta's way. And I guess I have to ask, I haven't seen a replay of just how bad it was, but it seemed like for a large part of his time out there on the field that every carry, Tino Fasua-Malaawi seemed to be, that elbow, that forearm seemed to be cocked a little bit. And I don't know, how bad was it, the one that he got penalised with?
I think
I'm yet to see it on replay.
I think Moses did a good job of convincing the officials that it was probably worse than it was. He did a very good job selling it, probably knowing that there are some priors at play there and there was a potential to get the penalty. But yeah, Tino is definitely one of those players that he is playing with fire every carry. Like he is cocking that arm and loading it up at a height that is going to get him in trouble. And look, if as a tackler you're beholden to the ball runner coming at you at a variable height beyond what you're responsible for at a normal sort of level, it's true for the ball carrier too. If you've got a 6 foot half or a 5'10" dummy half coming at you, you cannot raise that arm. And while Titans fans might feel aggrieved that it was a borderline penalty, this is one that's been cooking for weeks and months now. And I think that given that he also had a shoulder charge, which used to be an auto send-off too, not too long ago. Send-off, sin bin, sorry. Gosh, not a send-off. Tino probably a little bit lucky there as well, given that the ref would have felt the pressure of maybe an equalising sin bin at one point in that game as well.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into some of the key performers there tonight. Well, no, before we do, I want to talk about what didn't please me about Parramatta's performance and then what did please me.
Mm-hmm.
What didn't please me about Parramatta's performance was I was seeing elements in defence that weren't far removed to what I saw last week against the Titans. I thought that there was some, and I'm not talking about the period where the Eels were down to 11 men. I'm talking about when we were full complement of players out there on the field. I thought that we were, we had our moments when there were just far too many missed tackles, far too many spaces, and it seemed to be around the ruck and the edge of the ruck. And I just didn't, that concerned me a little bit. And I think it's something that we're probably going to need to fix up, because it's, I thought there was probably even more opportunities the Titans could have taken advantage of in that second half. They had times there where, look, I guess equally there's times where you could say, when is a player held? Because it seemed to be that there were players that were getting away offloads when it seemed that there was the tackle completed. But also there were players that were just able to slip out of tackles. How many tackles did Jaden Campbell slip out of?
You talk about those heart palpitations, 60s. There was a sequence of runs that felt like in sort of like either consecutive or near consecutive sets where he beat a number of defenders and went dangerously close to scoring. And I think he ended up setting up the Tanner Boyd try in the second half on the back of one of those runs. So, yeah, very, very frustrating. We did a good job by containing him on the kick returns in general. But, yeah, there was just that sequence of plays where we got very sloppy marking up on him and let him break some tackles.
Well, he's credited with 7 tackle breaks. 7. And if you had have asked me, what my estimate was straight after the game, I might have said somewhere between 10 and 12. So I'm not quite sure how they've come to 7. But anyway, that's what it is.
So, yeah, I suppose that typifies your frustrations with our defensive efforts, and I think you're spot on there. Given what we saw against the Warriors last week, you would have hoped to be a little bit sharper in behind the ruck and thereabouts against the Titans. But again, we spoke about it at length across multiple podcasts this week, 60s, about falling into the trap of dropping into their tempo. And unfortunately, when we had that red hot start, I sort of just went, oh no, it's like counterintuitively, it's like the worst thing you could do against the Titans. Like, I know that there's also opportunity to go on and put a score onto them after going up 12-0, but against the Titans, you just know we score 2 early tries without having to do too much. I mean, Reg goes over with a nice ball from Brendan Hands in that spin, and then Will Penasini is able to scoop up that deflected ball of the Gold Coast Titans when Bryce Cartwright led that raid down the right edge. And they're both good tries, but you could just see in the air that we're going to get a little bit sloppy, we're going to get a little bit loose and start overplaying our hands, and sure enough, that's exactly what came. And, the Titans were sweating on it, I swear. They were sweating on it.
Yeah, and that's the point that we need to make. The concern that we had, if we tried to play a brand of football which was a little bit more unstructured, a little bit more expansive, that is just not the sort of play for us to play against the Titans, because when it happens and when we get a little bit of success, as you said, we get loose. And I don't know why, but we do. We seem to steer well away from our systems, especially in defence. And it's not a question of, do we have points in us to score? Because, yeah, we do have points in us to be able to get the tries on the board against the Titans. And yeah, there might have been some occasions in this match today where it was a little bit frustrating, where it just wasn't happening for us in attack. But we always knew that we were going to, there was a try or two in us in the second half to edge ahead of them. But the problem was always going to be, how many are we going to let them score? Because we are loose in our structures. And you could see that even like we weren't settled on look at that, the breaks that were made in the early tackles after a kick. Like there was one point there where we completed a set perfectly. Moses
weighted it perfectly into the corner, and then Pereira escapes containment with there was a complete breakdown in the middle of the field with the umbrella defense, and he escapes containment, makes 30 meters, and credit to the boys for rallying from there, but that was like that real sliding doors moment where you're like, oh my God, we're going to lose this. Like, he was threatening the breakout for a huge run, get into scoring range and take the game away from us. but we obviously rallied and the second half, like I said, it was gutsy, but it was far from perfect. And it was, while it was a marked improvement over what we saw in the first half, I mean, the coach has got a lot of material to absolutely flay the boys on through the week in training ahead of that trip to the Gold Coast, to Townsville.
Yeah. And so now to that counterpoint, because I talked about what I didn't like from the Eels. What I did like was the fact that we did rally and that we didn't panic as such, and that when the time came that we needed to put like some really good structure play and set up for the field goal, that we took that opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it was a marked difference to what the Titans did when they were in a similar position.
And I think
it was.
Sorry, you finish.
Yeah, I was just going to say, that it was. I wouldn't say that it's as good as how the Storm would get themselves set for icing field goals when they needed to be taken, but you just had that sense that we had that in us, and the Titans were anything but that. And it proved to be the case where we had Lane was able to charge down their first field goal attempt, and in their second field goal attempt, well, it just, I don't know, he probably had enough time for him to be able to get the field goal, but they weren't quite in the ideal position that they could have got themselves into. So, I'm really happy with the fact that we kept our composure at the time in the game where we really needed to keep the composure. So that was probably the part that pleased me the most. Couple of outstanding performances I thought out there. Will Penasini really bounced back from last week.
Oh my God, the violent 60s. The violence, that was a man on a mission. And while with the ball in hand, the opportunities weren't there, just 12 runs. I mean, just 12 runs, but for a relatively inefficient 73 meters. In defense, he was a man possessed. He was destroying them. So I love that energy. And going back to what you were saying about the what pleased you with the sort of the stoicism in a way in that second half, it was the core players. Will Penasini being one of them, but Mitchell Moses, Quentin Gufferson, Bryce Cartwright, Ryan Madison, outstanding as well. And one thing that really came out to me there, thinking back on it just now, was Guffo had a pretty ordinary first half. Let's not kid ourselves. He got beaten by Philip Sami for that try, which I don't think was a try. There was a clear promotion of the ball. Even with momentum, you still cannot promote the ball. That was a double movement, but he got beaten all ends up there at the last line. He had that drop ball before half time. Fair to say he had a pretty ordinary first half. But he really channeled the spirit of a player that you mentioned this week in James Maloney. That goldfish memory, get back to work, next set, make the difference. And in the second half, he really typified that. The try he scored in the corner is going to be a highlight reel poster sort of try for the Eels for the rest of the season and moving forwards. And then Mitchell Moses. Just the situation never got too big for him. He just locked in that kicking game. And he changed it up too. We're so used to that sort of prioritizing the time in the air sort of clearing bombs. But he changed it. He went and got the driver out and flattened it out and really picked apart the back three of the Gold Coast to put the Eels in favourable territorial positions.
I'm not sure that I've seen Gutho as fired up after.
Oh my goodness, how pumped was he in that scoring sequence and at the end of the game? He knew how important it was to get that win, as ugly as it was, and also on his own impact or lack thereof initially, but then the turning points. So you love to see a captain fired up like that.
Oh yeah, the way he was revving up the crowd after the match was over, like really full on celebrating the win. And I've termed that as the great escape, the match tonight. And I don't think there was any other way to say it, because we were a long way from our best. We were a long way from what you would call grand final or finalist form. Like it was one of those games, almost like last week, where you have to put it, you put it behind you and then move on. I guess the part that you don't put behind you is the fact that it is a win. So they had to enjoy getting it there because getting that win, because in the end it was a win against the odds, mind you, odds that they made themselves. You'd have to say, like there was, as we spoke about and we'll speak about shortly, there was officiating that it wasn't happy with, but those big calls, the sin bin calls, that was of the Eels' own making, the missed tackles of the Eels' own making. So, what about you, mate? You've just spoken about those individual performances. Anything else that really stood out for you as a positive?
I mean, we spoke about it in our preview. I know that the Titans also sort of mixed up the formula, had a kickoff by dropping their captain, Tino. Well, I say dropping, but giving him a different role in this game and putting him on the bench to help balance out that interchange rotation a bit more. But I thought that Ryan Madison was a massive factor in this game from the interchange. Going back to that role that he had last year, 60s, coming off almost as like a primary middle, but in the secondary rotation. I thought it was huge. Big carries, quality offloads, good defense. I thought Maddo was a real lightning rod for some of the best football that we played in this game.
Yeah, those carries that he made, like he seemed to be getting like 15 meters easy, like just so easy. What's he credited for? Like
13 for 150 for a couple of tackle breaks. Yeah, so incredible efficiency. The sort of numbers that we'll see from him last year, where he was really driving a wedge into the opposition defenses in that extended run heading into that contract extension that he enjoys now with the Eels. So good to see him in top nick. There's other little things. I thought Joe Ofahengaue, while I want to see more production from him with the ball in hand, he was a sledgehammer out there tonight, 60s. There was a couple of absolute bell ringers, which I always love to see, those granite shoulders in defense. So credit to Joe there. I thought Andrew Davey looked a bit more at home in the middle in this game. I thought Sean Lane, while the numbers aren't incredible, 7 runs, 96 metres, good efficiency on a per carry basis. I thought he looked a lot better after what we saw last week against New Zealand. The other thing too that we didn't talk about really while praising Mitchell Moses and Quinton Gufferson just before, but how about the conviction from Gufferson to reach into his bag of skills, bag of tricks, and pull out that crossfield kick for Bowie Simonson ahead of like what would end up setting up the field goal, I believe. That huge crossfield kick from inside their own 20 or own 25, I think it was, with Bowie playing it perfectly and scooping it up. So, yeah, yes, the Eels played some very ordinary football, and there's so much they can do better moving forwards. But at the same time, despite playing awful football, despite putting themselves in a massive hole, down 13 versus 11, they found a way to claw a path to victory. And again, that speaks volumes towards the conviction, the determination of the team. As bad as they played, they still found a path to victory, as unlikely as it was.
Was that basically the match-winning play, that kick?
Yeah.
That kick downfield?
Yeah, I think it really broke, not a deadlock, but that would have been a defensive sequence there for the Titans where they would have been looking to bottle the Eels inside their own 40. And yes, Mitchell Moses still likely gets away a quality kick, but you still have a chance to maybe field the ball 20, 25 metres out and maybe get some traction on a kick return. Instead, the Eels are suddenly on the attack over halfway, looking to set up for a field goal. And, to Mitch's credit, the ice in his veins, he only needed the one shot and he made it count.
Yeah, and credit to the composure around the play, the ball, the snap pass back to him. I mean, all that sort of stuff has to work well, doesn't it? Because it's one thing for the kicker to have the ice in the veins to be able to get that field goal there, but I think everyone has to have the ice in the veins on those moments. Brendan Hands had to have the ice in the veins with getting that pass back to him. It's easy enough to say that it should come second nature, but I mean, they're the big times in the game, and you need people to be able to execute their role as they should at those moments. And credit there for that pass back. And you know what? It was one of those games where I guess that we saw enough glimpses of good para for us to think, well, what happens from here? Like, it's a big road trip this week, isn't it, up to North Queensland to take on the Cowboys. And they're obviously on a bit of a roll. Their confidence is going to be sky high. And we think, well, we've had an ordinary game against the Warriors. We've had a less than ideal game against the Titans. But I think we saw enough good Parramatta tonight to have an element of confidence that we can get the job done against the Cowboys. Now, the question then becomes, are we going to have to do it without Reg and without Sivo? What's your thoughts? What's your initial reaction, mate?
I noticed that the Daily Telegraph is already kicking up a furor about Reg, saying he should have been sent off and not sin-binned. Again, I think that the sin-bin was the correct call, and I have no qualms with both the bunker and Butler coming to that conclusion. I would also, if I was Eels, be harvesting evidence from round one last year, where Jaden Campbell, not only led with the knees, but caved in a young man's chest, didn't get penalised, didn't get sin-bin, didn't get any sort of suspension. And I'd be, if they're going to charge him, I'd be taking that to the judiciary and sort of asking for the consistency, because what's good for the goose is good for the gander.
Without question, Reg has been guilty of a brain snap, a lazy moment where he's just leant with the knees into the player. Did he do any damage to the player? No. I mean, look, that's the first thing that you say is, well, what sort of damage has happened there? And the answer there is none. When you talk about that incident last year, what damage was there? Well, the bloke was sent to the emergency department of the hospital. He had to be transported by ambulance. He ended up out of the game for about 10 weeks, something like that, with his chest caved in, his rib cage caved in, and no action taken, nothing to answer for there. And you go, how what did that happen? And so, but I guess because it isn't a good look, where there is no question of whether or not we think that it was a nothing event. It was something. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking he'll get a week.
I could definitely see something in the vicinity of as low as a fine to maybe max 2 weeks, depending on what sort of mood the MRC is in when they sort of collate their charges. I think the player that might be in a little bit more trouble might be Maika, who the hit, I don't think it was particularly dangerous, but there is a pattern of behaviour with Maika now, with those jams where he's gotten it wrong a few times, and the prize could lead to a more aggressive grading from the MRC, perhaps. And on that, I think Maika is doing a very good job identifying these opportunities to jam, but he needs to get that target down lower. He has gotten it wrong a couple of times now, and to the detriment of the team in this particular occasion for sin binning. And while good defensive decision making is what you want to see, you need to also execute correctly, and he's gotten that wrong now. So lower that target level, jam and be aggressive, but really look to sort of go almost like the nipple high when you're making that initial contact, instead of around shoulder high where he is right now, which allows that arm to sometimes creep up and make contact with the jaw.
Yeah, I think Sivo's gone for a week with this.
Yeah, I would not be shocked.
I think we're playing out without these two players in the next match.
And
that's just my take on where we're at.
I'm not going to say Reg is replaceable, because we just saw him pop off for 170 metres and have a great game where he scored the opening try, even with a stint in the bin. So Reg is not replaceable. We do have two guys in Makatoa and Ogden who can do a job there. On the wing, though, it's a bit spooky, isn't it, 60s? The Eels will probably look to Isaac Lumi, who actually didn't play today, so I don't know if he's injured. And outside that, the options are pretty skinny. You can bring Hayes Dunster back, but I don't think he's 100% either, the poor guy. So I don't know. Do you put a back row onto the centres? Wanga Blake? Goodness, I don't know.
Yeah, look, honestly, I've got no idea what he's going to do. I'm not sure what the injury issue was around Lumi. If he's available, I guess he plays. If he's not, then yeah, there's some real question marks as to what the Eels will do in that situation, because we've had scenarios in recent weeks where it's been Wenty Ron Massey Cup players that have been called up for reserve grade because we haven't had the players, we haven't had wingers there. We've had to call wingers up from Park Football, and we've had the brother of
Mulatalo Lorenzo.
Yeah, yes, and so it's been Josh Menhinick was the player that was called up as well from Wenty. So whether they decide that they were going to go, they'll maybe have a crack at using Wonga again. I know that Wonga's got a little bit of a lack of confidence in the high ball out on the wing, and they're not, but I don't think they're going to go and swap around one of the centres, for example, Bailey Simonson. I don't think they'd shift him out onto the wing and bring up a centre, because again, that flies in the face of what Brad's interested in doing with his decisions around who, what he does to replace players. He doesn't like to weaken a position to try to fill another one. So I guess we have to have maybe fingers crossed that we're wrong, that there isn't a suspension, that there's only fines with this. But yeah, I can't see it only being a fine this week. I mean, if it was, it's funny, if it was an opposition team that had done this, maybe I could. Maybe I'd be thinking, well, yeah, this is gonna end up being just a fine. But I know given that we've made the mistake there, I can't see it being anything but a suspension. So hit that stinger, mate.
You can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious.
All right, so what got your ire outside of Parramatta's own issues in this game, 60s?
Okay, this was going to be a game where the Titans' tactics was to get up fast off the line and challenge the officials to call them offside, and do it often enough that they get to that point where they just don't want to blow the whistle anymore. And that's pretty much what we saw out there. The Titans left early all night. They were offside all night. Nothing happened. There were forward passes that were missed. There was blatant knock-ons that were missed. It was an ordinary officiating performance. And we repeat, we're not griping about the sin bins. The sin bins we accept. The officiating outside of that, I thought, was just really, really ordinary. And the talk about the go to the stats for me, mate. What was the play the ball speed?
The play the ball speed was actually quite even in this one. 3.75 for the Eels versus 3.82 for the Titans. So one of the rare instances where the Eels are actually in the same vicinity as their opposition. But I will agree with you about the offsides. I felt like the Titans definitely sort of bit the bullet and taking those early penalties. I think the Eels got a call very early on for offside for the payoff later on in the game, where they could be aggressive defensively without getting called out.
Yeah, well, as far as I was concerned as well, I'm a little bit surprised that play the ball speed was even, because for me the eye test said that there was a deliberate effort from the Titans to slow up the play.
There was a lot of spoiling in the ruck for sure. It could have been a few more 6 against scored easily. For me, 60s, I really got to tee off on the touch judges. Like, why do you exist if you cannot call a forward pass from the kickoff when Aaron Schopp lobs it a good metre forwards? Because he's lazy and he just gets the ball out the wrong. The crowd went off when that happened, and it got missed. So look, lots of bad calls. I'm sure that Titans fans will go there and say that the Eels should have been pinged for this and that and a few other things, because that's the way the game goes. But yeah, it felt like there were some pretty egregious missed calls from our perspective for our team. So, yeah, like I said, the sin bins absolutely bang on. I think the bunker got them right. No issues there. Eels made those mistakes. But, yeah, there was some pretty ordinary calls around them in the first half in particular.
Okay, so now let's get back to the positive. 3-2-1 time, mate. Who's your three?
Three, I'm going to go off and look, there were some great performers there, even with all the errors that we had, but I'm going to go with Ryan Madison. I feel like he was a real lightning rod for some of the best football we played, and there were a couple other players that did some really good stuff. Bryce Cartwright, Will Penasini, Guffo second half, Mitchell Moses pulling the strings. So it's not like he didn't have competition, but I just felt like he played a really clean game in a game where there was a lot of hot and cold football.
Yeah. It's, you know what, it's very hard for me to argue against that. It's, you know, there's players out there that I thought did some really, really good things. Gutho, of course, is one of the prime people that fits into that category of would we have won without him? And, you know, there's a case that probably we don't win without Gutho. But I also think that's the steadying runs that Maddo was able to get through the middle at a time when we needed it the most. It's hard to argue against that. But you know what? I am going to argue against that just to be different. I'm going to go for Will Penasini.
Yeah, Will's going to feature for me as well.
Yeah, it was just one of those games where he had a number of big moments in it. You know, the stats don't jump out at you from him. He's got like 73 run meters. That doesn't really jump out, but it was the carries themselves that were so physical. And defensively, he's down for 16 tackles, 4 misses. But I'm struggling to think about those misses or where they happened. I can remember some really important tackles that he made. So it's I'm going with Will on this. I think he was important for us to get the win today, and I'm going with Maddo for 2 points there.
Yeah, my 2 points goes to Bryce Cartwright. I think outside of a errant offload off the first possession of the second half for him, which was dived on by Brendan Hands and sort of saved any sort of blushes, I thought he was... I mean, there was also a missed tackle at one point on Campbell as well, which I think both he and Mitchell both had misses in that run there. But I thought that Bryce was very good, set the tone with some physical carries, got an opportunistic try in the start of the second half, also set up Will Penasini's try off a great run down the right edge. So yeah, I think, and also we talked about him and Will. My goodness, they inflicted some serious damage on David Fafita in this game. He did not want to run the ball. They were really going. I mean, there was one sequence where I think it was Cartwright got him first, and then Penasini got him the second time, or vice versa, on the same run. He went back about 10 meters.
Yeah. Well, now I'm conflicted as well for the 1 point. Because I try to use that yardstick of could we have won this game without them? And Gutho has to feature in this. Mitch Moses has to feature in this. But you know what? I'm going to give it to the big man, Junior. I just thought that he brought enough of that physicality, both him and Reg. Like it's a split air between the two, you know, selecting one of those two. But I just thought we had to have someone there in the engine room that deserved another point there. So I'm going with Junior for the 1 point.
I did like what Junior brought to the table today. A lot of direct football. Did look to offload on the back of that, which is where he plays his best football. And while the opportunities to create flashy scoring plays from it didn't develop, I feel like the methodology was right. So, yeah, Junior did have a good game, but my 1 point goes to Will Penasini. I talked about that violence, the impact that he brought defensively. And, yes, he's down for quite a few missed tackles. But, You have to run the sort of tape over that to see where it got wrong. If it was like checking off someone and then someone else making the tackle, I don't know. But it felt like he made the big tackles when he needed to. There was one in the second half in particular where the Titans were looking to develop something down their left edge, and he just drove. Was it Sami maybe? It was Sami or maybe Kelly, I don't know. But he absolutely just rode them into the ground with a cracking tackle. So, yeah, I mean, Will scored a try, some real violent tackles. Loved what I saw there. And then serious honourable mentions to Moses Gufferson Jr., all those boys there.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, as I said, I think there's a number that fit into the category of could the Eels have won the match without them? And I think all the players that we've mentioned, it would be hard to see the Eels coming up with a win if one of those players was missing from the team today. So we put this down as an escape, mate. The fortunate victory. Is it going to be one of those Pyrrhic victories? Because we could very well lose a couple of players as a result of this match. So
I wouldn't put it down as Pyrrhic
because
because there's no long-term injuries, and while you might get short-term suspensions, you still have the opportunity to go up to the North Queensland Cowboys hometown stadium and still maybe jag a result there. But yes, frustrating that we could come out of this with a couple of suspensions, but that's on the boys, Maika and Reg, for getting it wrong. And if they do cop a charge, you don't have to wear it.
Yeah. Okay. So, I think there's probably less as well that I really want to say about the New South Wales Cup. We normally would go into a bit of a review of that, but it again was less than ideal, and yeah, may arguably a little bit better in some places, but they got beaten by I thought a very ordinary South team, 30-10, and
Open
I don't
scoring
think
as
really
well, so they got the jump, but couldn't convert it into anything meaningful. And yeah, just I think it was 18-4 at halftime, and they were never really in it.
Yeah, it wasn't the greatest game to watch, so it's probably best that we leave it there and that we just look forward now to a really big game against the Cowboys up there in North Queensland. No doubt they'll be looking to get their revenge on the grand final qualifier last year at the same venue, but there's nothing to say that the Eels can't keep the ball rolling and continue our march towards finals football. That table's pretty jam-packed, and we need to do everything in our power to get into the top four. We won't get into the top four unless we can pick up some of these tougher games, and we've certainly got no shortage of tough clashes ahead of us. I think we'll need to be better than we were today, but we have to take some encouragement that we were able to get the victory under the circumstances of being down to 11 players at one point during the first half. So, mate, anything more you want to add to that?
No, you take these wins. Yes, they're ugly as sin, but they count all the same. And given what comes up ahead for the Eels, getting the victory today was critical. So, in that regard, well done to the boys for the big rally. But they've got to clean up plenty ahead of that trip up to Townsville next week.
Yeah, absolutely true. And we've got, and of course, next week, we do have the first round of the NRLW Premiership, and that will be at CommBank Stadium on Sunday. So looking forward to seeing people out there. And until our next podcast, mate, go you mighty Eels.